Honestly, how do you decide what shot you should play? Well, there are a number of factors that could influence that. For example, where you are on the court, where your opponent is on the court, where the ball is on the court, a few minutes later. And of course, the most important is what you had for breakfast. And remember, you only have a fraction of a second to decide. You can't spend a long time thinking. So deciding how to decide is where it gets interesting. Now, I'm sure you've already seen from the title or the thumbnail that this video is about the traffic light system, and one of the best ways to understand the system is to see it in action. So let's watch a few seconds of a professional's gameplay and my overlay to help you understand what's happening. We'll explore that in a little bit more detail a little bit later in the video. But before we do that, I want to introduce you to the decision hierarchy. Now, other coaches or players may call it something else, but it's essentially a process to help you decide what shot to play. At the top is what I call personal veto. This is where you say, I'm not going to play this particular shot or shots under any circumstances. Now, in my case, it's a volley boast. I never play volley boasts anymore. The next one is guiding principles. Now, as you know, this video is about the traffic light system, TLS. Now, there are other guiding principles and other ways of thinking about it, and if you use them, please put them in the comments. Now, to be honest, you could swap these two around. The first one could be guiding principles, and the second one could be personal veto. But I always put it at the top because that's how I like to think about it. Next is game plan. What's game plan, you say? Well, game plan is a combination of a strategy and tactics. What is strategy and are tactics, Philip? Well, put simply, strategy is what you are trying to achieve. For example, rush your opponent. Tactics, in the plural, is how you plan to achieve your strategy. For example, we've said that you want to rush your opponent, so it might be volley more often. Hit the ball a little bit lower than you normally do because then it doesn't come back, so the opponent has to rush it a little bit. Hit it a little bit harder than you do. Maybe boast a little bit more often. Play a few more half volleys. There are a number of tactics that you can use to reach a strategy. And then the final one is shot selection, which you might have said or might have thought, well, that's the only one that counts. But if you take into account the previous three ideas, you get to a position on the court and you could probably have 20, 25, maybe even 30 possible shots. But the 3 points before narrow it down to only 2 or 3, and that makes choosing that shot a little bit easier. And it's important to remember that a shot selection is based on your abilities. There's no point saying, well, the best shot in this case would be a short straight volley if you're terrible at short straight volleys. So let's define the traffic light system. Now, it might seem obvious what it is, but I'd rather spend a few moments making sure that you fully understand what's happening. All right, so the first one, red, is defend. Now, this is the time you play these shots when you are under pressure, when you need to give yourself time and or space, and they're generally hit high and soft, more or less lobs, but not always. Now, the problem here is that a lot of club players don't play defensive shots when they should. I've got a number of theories why they don't do that, but one of the main theories is that they just don't recognise that they need to play defensive. They just rush in, hit the ball hard. They think that perhaps if I hit it hard, the best form of defence is offence, that kind of, often repeated thing. And that can be true, but offence in this case would be a really high quality lob. And they don't practice them enough, and then they don't play them. So that's really important to recognise that this is a defensive situation and play an appropriate shot. The next one is probe, or yellow is probe, amber if you're in the UK. The idea here is that you are looking to create opportunities without giving your opponent an opportunity. It's most of the shots in squash, let's be honest. It's the shots that go up and down the wall, across the court, into the back. It's the shots that don't risk anything, but hopefully give you a big return. Now, it's important to note here that these shots and all of the definitions are relative. So if I or you were to go on court with either Rami or Nick, their probing shot would feel like an attacking shot for us. And if you play somebody who's a little bit worse than you, your probing shot might feel like an attacking shot to them. But it's all relative. And then the final one is green, which is attack. And these are the winners, the nicks, the kills. But two things to remember. Firstly, you must be 100% sure you are in the right position to do that. I'm not suggesting you go for kills when you're out of position. You need to be well positioned. You must have created the opportunity, or the opportunity found itself either through a bit of luck or a bit of bad luck on your opponent. You must fully commit to that. If this is the right time to go for your kill or your winner, commit to it. But don't assume it's going to be a winner. Make sure you cover what your opponent could reply with. Don't just stand there, smack a nick, and then look at the balcony. Wow, what a great shot, only to find that your opponent got it. No, commit to that kill, but don't assume it's going to be a winner. That's all well and good, really. It's not that complicated, is it? It's a very simple system. It's pretty easy to understand. But it's simple to understand when you're doing it. When you're watching somebody else, well, it might get a little bit more complicated then. And the reason is, do you define the shot based on the intention or the result? Well, it really should be the intention, but you're not playing. So when you see a shot that you're not sure, is it a defensive shot or a probing shot? I'm not really sure. You can't get into the person's mind. So that's why I created these two sort of half colours, the defend, the probe, where it might have been one of the other, but it's not really clear. And then of course the probe and the attack. And there is a case to be made that you can say that these shots really do exist. You're sort of halfway. It's more of an aggressive probe or a defensive probe. And I accept that. But I feel that when you're on court and you're playing, you shouldn't be one or the other. It should be 1, 2 or 3. It should be defend, probe or attack. Because if you get to a point where you're not sure whether you should probe or defend, defend. If you get to a point where you're not sure whether you should probe or attack, probe. You've got to be totally committed to that attack. And if you're not, it should be a probe. And if you're in any doubt between a probe and a defend, you should defend. But I've included it here just because I'm not sure. And you might argue with me in a second when we watch a bit longer of that match, the people playing, whether, Philip, are you sure that that was a defend, or are you sure that that was a probe? Yeah, maybe not. But it's a process to go through to help you improve. Okay, so let's see it in action. We're going to watch for just over a minute. I'm not going to commentate, I'm not going to say anything, and we're just going to watch it. You watch the colour overlays of both of the shots of the players and see whether you agree or disagree with me. Hopefully that visualization, the color overlays, really brings it home, really helps you understand what the intention was of each player. Now, what you'll probably notice is how often professionals defend. I think that they defend a lot more than club players. And the reason they do that is because they play smart squash. What's smart squash, Philip? Well, smart squash is where you use your analytical brain, not your emotional heart. You choose the right shot for the right situation, not the one that you really want to play. What I would like to do though is take a look at a couple of those shots, not all of them, the ones where I wasn't sure, and I'll tell you what I was thinking that they were thinking, and then you can decide whether you agree or disagree with me. So let's go and do that.
So the first shot I want to look at is one of Rami's. And the key point here is just because somebody hits the ball hard doesn't mean that it's automatically an attacking shot. People change the pace of their shots to break an opponent's rhythm. This next shot is from Nick. Now I've called it a defend probe. It's clearly not a full defensive shot, but at the same time it's not a full probe either. He's clearly just trying to stay in the rally and wait for a better opportunity later on. We're back to Rami for the third one, and I've called this a probe and attack. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure on Rami's intentions. Was he trying to rush Nick? Was he trying to play the ball a little bit towards Nick? Maybe a combination of both. But I just feel that he was trying to do something more than just probe the ball. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this particular shot. Staying with Rami for number 4, and I've called this a defend probe. It's a service return that he didn't volley, and he finds himself in a slightly difficult situation. All he's trying to do is get the ball into the back and keep the rally going and wait for a better opportunity later. And this final sequence is an interesting series of shots. What happens first is that Nick plays a probing attack on the volley, and then he's absolutely surprised by how attacking the reply from Rami is, that little cross-court flick drop. He then has to play a very defensive shot. This is the perfect example of a defensive situation. Rami then counters with a probing attack. He's not trying to kill the ball, but he's just trying to put Nick under a lot more pressure, and that results in Nick having to play another defensive shot, which actually goes out. Now it's interesting because all this happened from the probing attack from Nick. If you don't choose the right time, you might find yourself struggling later in that rally.
Okay, so how do you implement this into your game? Well, the first thing is you start with your personal veto and you decide which shot or shots you don't want to play. Now, it might be because you're terrible at them, or it might be because you want to improve other shots. In my case, the Volley Boast is because I play them too much. The next thing, you need to understand the traffic light system and think about that when you're playing. So when you get on court, make sure you're thinking defend, probe and attack. And then the next one is the gameplay. You've got to have a game plan. You've got to have a game plan. Better to have a bad game plan than no game plan. All right, of course, better to have a good game plan than a bad game plan. But having a bad game plan, sorry, my mouth's not working now. Having a bad game plan, at least you've got a process that you're going through. And it's better than just getting on court and deciding every second what shot you're going to play. So I suggest you do that. But Philip, how do I decide on my game plan? Well, sometimes it's a simple game plan. You're playing a very tall player. Okay, so you really want to stretch them. Keep it high, keep it low, keep them forward, keep it to the back. You're playing somebody who's fitter. Well, maybe you really need to reduce the number of shots so that you keep it a little bit tighter, so you increase your quality. There's lots of, different ways of having a game plan, and even the simple game plan. The most simple game plan for me is don't hit many boasts and cross courts. I played really good squash, or I used to play really good squash, my best squash, when I only played 1 in 10 boasts or 1 in 10 cross courts. I can play really tight when I really focus on that, and that helped me. The next thing you need to do is think about your shot selection. And what that means is making sure that you understand what you are good at and what you're bad at. Because if you don't know those things, you won't be able to choose the right shot at the right time. So that's a process that you'll need to go through. Think about it. Make a fair and honest assessment. What am I good at? What am I bad at? What do I need to improve? And at least that process will then give you something to work on for the next month or so. Now, what would be great is if you videoed yourself playing a match and then you did the analysis yourself. You could sit down with a piece of paper or a pen, or even use a phone if you can type that quickly, and you just put D, P, A, P, D, D, and you just write it down as you see it. It's going to be really messy. And then what you can do is you can use an app, like a spreadsheet or an online service, and create a pie chart. And you can see the distributions or the proportion of the types of shots you are playing. Now, there is no ideal proportion because a lot depends on the type of player you're playing. If you're playing an attacking player, then you probably play more defensive shots than against other people. Ideally, do this every 3 or 4 months, ideally against the same player, and then you will see the progression. Are you increasing the number of defensive shots? And if you're not, it doesn't mean that you're not playing good squash, but it might mean that you're not playing smart squash. Do you want me to do the visual overlay for your games? Well, it's something that I would love to do as part of my paid services. I do video analysis, video chats, and some other things as well. But I'm not really sure whether it's going to be worth it for you. And I'll tell you why. It's very time consuming. It takes me a long time, or it took me a long time to do those visual overlays. What I'd like to do is offer it to 6 people for a nominal fee of €10. And I'll decide, and those people can decide whether it's worth it or not. So if you're interested, send me an email to tls@bettersquash.com. And about a week after the release of this video, I'll randomly select 6 people, or if only 6 people apply, if only 3 people apply, then I'll choose those people. I'll send you an email and we'll talk about how it's going to work. And then we'll try it. And if everybody feels that it's worth it, and I set a price, and I say to those people, would you have paid this much? And they said yes, then I might offer it as a service. Would you also like me to do more of the professional games? Now, I only did just over a minute between Nick and Rami, but I'm willing to do maybe 3 or 5 minutes. If you feel that you'd like to see this in operation, I could make it a monthly series, very little commentary, perhaps just a little bit of commentary at the end on some of the more questionable calls that I made, and then you can decide whether you agree with those or not. So if that is something that you'd like to see, please let me know in the comments. So my personal veto, Volley Boast. A few people I've mentioned it before in videos and articles on my website, and a few people have asked me what's really happening. And this is what's happening. And I think it's important because I think it applies to you too, as a club player. I love Volley Boasts. I love them. I love playing a volley boast when my opponent is expecting a short straight volley and it catches them by surprise and it goes into the opposite corner and it's a winner. Man, that dopamine rush I get from hitting one of those is fantastic. But here is the problem. If I play one on my first time and it's a winner, I want to do it again. I mean, who wouldn't? You hit a winner? Why wouldn't you want to hit a winner again? But they're only effective if they're played occasionally. If you play them too often, they're not so effective. And if you play them once, twice, maybe 3 times a match, great. But I can't do that because once I hit one, I want to hit another one. But then you've got the other side. What if it's not a winner? What if my opponent gets it? Either they hit a winner or I stay in the rally. Well, then I feel as though I've wasted it and I need to do another one because I need to hit a winner from it. Otherwise, the previous one wasn't so good. And then I've got what we call the sunken cost fallacy, which is the idea that the more effort you put into something, if you don't feel that you're getting a return, you need to keep doing it until you do get a return. But that's the wrong way of thinking about it. Now, I said that I think that applies to you. Now, I don't know whether it's Volley Boast, but there's a good chance that it might be a reverse angle, often called the leisure centre boast. Because you see that shot so often in club players, more lower club players than higher level club players. But you see it. And maybe the first one's a winner, but then the rest aren't. And to be honest, the better you get, the more obvious they get, until you get to a very high level where they are really able to disguise it, and then it's really hard to see. But for club players, it's pretty obvious because of the way they hit the ball. You only need to step back a little bit, look at the overall view of the player, and you'll realise that they're going to hit one, and you could start walking before they even hit it. So you've got to be careful. Don't hit your favourite shot too often to get your dopamine rush. And if it's not working, don't keep playing it, because the chances are it's not going to work that day. So that's why my personal veto is no volley boasts. There is a summary sheet to go with this video. Link is in the text description. It describes everything I've talked about in this video in a text format. It's in a PDF, so you can print it and keep it in your bag or review it if you want to. If you've got any doubts or questions or queries, just put them in the comments and I will respond as soon as possible. And as always, do something every single day to improve your squad. See ya.